Say welcome to the AMSN. This is our, probably, where's Mike at? Mike, this is our fifth one, our bi-monthly, if you will. I'm the chairman of the AMSN. My name is Eric Rivera, inventory manager here for Sears. Been here for 5 years. Air Force veteran. I'm still an active reservist, deployed, Bagram, Afghanistan, and wherever else they're going to send me next. Hopefully nowhere sometime soon. So want to just again, thank everyone. Wish everyone happy holidays. Hopefully everyone will enjoy the season as it starts to come upon us. And want to just reach out to all of the members saying thank you. And if you haven't received your PIN yet, please stop by Michelle and sign the authorization, and she'll give you your PIN, if you will. And for those of you who are not members, we have a sign-up sheet
outside.
And outside. So we will hopefully you'll join. And really, what this all is about is really supporting the military. From Sears associate perspective, the leadership here at Sears really supports us 100%. Otherwise, I wouldn't be up here talking about it, being a veteran of 24 years in the Air Force at the same time. So
we have one sign up.
Yay! We're plus one.
And anybody want a copy of the newsletter? It's there.
Yeah, we sent out a bi-monthly newsletter. We try not to clutter your emails. We want to make sure that we're giving you just pertinent information, like these type of events that are going on and things like that. So if we are cluttering your email, just tell us. We'll ease the information as we flow it to you. So with that said, I just would like to say again, thank you for coming out tonight. We have a great guest, pretty much an encore, if you will. He came to us during the Veterans event we had, our first annual, which we had a great turnout too. We had Leif Babin speak, and he was a Special Ops Army. No, I'm sorry, Navy. SEAL. I'm gonna get food thrown at me. Navies. The squids. I said it in a nice way. They call us fly boys.
27,
so,
21?
All right, here we go. All right, anyways, we'll get back to that. So we have a distinguished guest, Ed Effertz, and his wife, Rose. Ed's going to come up here and speak in just a minute, and basically when Ed stood up at the Veterans event, if you will, his brief summary of his life just kind of floored a lot of us, saying, wow, I mean, Leif even said, hey, you want to take over? We'll swap here. So we had to bring Ed back, and want to also introduce his wife, Rose. They've been married for 53 years. 56. Oh, that's what I had. Sorry, I don't know where 53 came from, but so with that, also I want to introduce another veteran. We have Norm, and what last name again? Norm?
Ost, O-S-T.
Ost, and his wife Vivian, Navy veteran. At the same
Squid.
time, yes. Yeah. So, and the members, we have plenty of veterans around here, if you will, that are part of the membership and the ones that we would eventually like to join. But the AMSN really, it's just not about veterans. We really are a family of supporters. So family members that were veterans, that do support the military, and who don't have anybody in the military, but support us anyway. So we want to kind of just knock that out of the way in terms of you can join the AMSN if you're here. You are sponsoring and you are a supporter, if you will, at the same time. So again, thank you for coming. There's just a couple of things on this date that I found interesting that I just want to just run through real quickly, and then I'm going to run through Ed's bio real quick, and then yield the floor to Ed in a second here. So on this day, back in 1636, the National Guard was officially created, which I didn't know that back in 1960. So us Guard reservists like myself can thank the creation back at that particular time. So 1918, U.S. Army of Occupation crossed the Rhine and entered Germany. 1920, League of Nations established. So on this date. Let's see, and then we get into World War II era. Over Tunisia, the U.S. Air Force, go Air Force, staged heavy raids over Bizerta and Tunis. We just did that just not too long ago. How history repeats itself here. 1943, the P-51D Mustang fighter is first used as an escort bomber. And as everyone who's a history buff knows, fighter escorts are servicemen and women that were, or men that were flying over Germany. We were losing aircraft at an astounding rate. So the P-51 came at the right time and pretty much turned the tide of the war at that time. So 1944, the U.S. Army achieved minor progress in a no offense 22 miles south of Durin. I believe that's in France. U.S. 5th Division captures Fort Genis d'Arc, the last German stronghold at Metz. So 1944, the American heavy cruiser Nashville, flagship of the Mindoro invasion fleet, and a destroyer are heavily damaged by kamikaze attacks. 1951, U.S. Air Force George Davis flies a F-86 Sabre out of the 4th Fighter Interceptor Wing and credited 4 aerial victories, shot down 4 MiGs. So go Air Force again. And on this date, back in 2003, something happened in Iraq. Let's see if anyone knows this particular date.
December 13th.
Mr.
Sabri.
Iraq
I wasn't there in December 2000. Oh, it was, yeah, Saddam was found.
Thank you. Yeah. Saddam Hussein was captured in his home farm of Tikrit, Iraq. Iraq, in Operation Red Dawn. So they found him in a little burrow hole and they lifted up that styrofoam thing, and there he was. On to Ed now. So I'm gonna, as Ed comes up, you can come up now. Sorry. So Ed, as I mentioned, 56 years of marriage to Rose. He was born in Chicago, Illinois, and Belmont Central.
Yeah.
He was drafted on Christmas Eve in the U.S. Army. And then he had to report to Camp Grant, Wisconsin on March 2nd, 1943. His basic training was Camp Atterbury, Indiana. And then you were to report to Fort Jackson, North Carolina. And then he boarded the Queen Elizabeth for a 3-day and 4-night cruise, if you will.
And that normal cruise took a convoy 10 to 12 days to get there.
So it really was cruising. Get you in the war quick. And the invasion, he landed on D+3, I believe, right. And then waded ashore at that time. Right. The battles he fought through France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and into Germany, the Battle of the Bulge. And Ed's going to talk about those events in a second here. And he was captured and had to report to Stalag 9B, if you will, correct? In December of 1944, then he was liberated in May of 1945. He was honorably discharged on November 28, 1945, with the rank of Staff Sergeant. And then he went to go work for International Harvester on December 2nd, 1945 in the lab, and worked there until July of 1985, where he retired as a engine division superintendent. Right, Ed? Right. So with that, you'll fill in the gaps. With
It's indeed a pleasure for me to come to talk to you and all of the people who were at the last meeting and welcomed me so gladly. And I only talked for about 2 minutes, but I sure appreciate it. It's sure good to get that warm feeling. As they told you in the resume here, I was born in Chicago. I now live in Sun City, Huntley. I come from a large family. I come from a family of 8. There was 3 boys, 3 girls, and my mother and father. We have 3 daughters. We have 7 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren. I worked for International Harvester for 40 years and wound up as the superintendent of the plant. It took me over 30 years before I could talk about anything about the Army. I just couldn't talk about it. I didn't want to listen to it, and I didn't want to talk about it. I started teaching Sunday school class, and I taught it for 21 years. And after the 21 years of teaching the young kids and them asking me questions all the time, they would always ask me, what happened in the service? What did you do? And I'd say, okay, we finish our lesson, we'll talk about it. So they'd hurry up and finish the lesson and get all the answers, and then we'd talk about it. I graduated from Steinmetz High School on the northwest side of Chicago in 1942, June. And as you heard, on March 1st of 1943, I was inducted into the Army. And I was discharged in November 28th, 1995. And it's only by the grace of God that I'm here today, not by any heroics on my part, but just by the grace of God that I was able to come back. I'd like to spend a few minutes to witness my faith in the Lord, and that He watches over us, cares for us, and that He pulled me through while I was in the service. About 68 years ago, when I went into service with some of your fathers and grandfathers went in, World War II. Before I left the draft board, my family and I gathered around the kitchen table like was always the way we did it. When somebody was going to leave, we held hands around the table. My dad said he read the scripture, and he read from the 14th chapter of John. Let not your heart be troubled, but believe in God. He had a prayer, and after we had that prayer, we were excused. I did this same thing around the table with my older brother, my younger brother, and myself. All three of us were in the service at the same time. My older brother was in the combat engineers. I was in the infantry, the anti-tank platoon, and my younger brother was a Marine. I had a few unusual things happen to me, and I had a lot of bad things which you're not going to hear about. What was it like while I was in service? Was I scared? You're darn right I was scared. Even though I was a platoon sergeant, I was scared. I was afraid. I was lonely. And anybody that tells you they weren't just aren't telling you the truth. We trained for the invasion, but we were supposed to be the backup troops. However, we were alerted, and when we were rushed over on the Queen Elizabeth, as you saw, the Queen Elizabeth rushed us over in 3 days and 4 nights. There were 16 men to a suite, which normally had 2 people in it. We had 2 meals on the plane, on the ship, because you couldn't serve 3. It took you 24 hours to have 2 meals served on the ship. So we ate 2 meals each day while we were on the ship. The 3rd night out, we were attacked by submarines. The ship is so fast, it outran the submarines. It didn't have a chance. We landed in Southampton, England, and we were stationed at Cheltenham National Racetrack. We cleaned our guns and went into a staging area, waiting to hear. After about 3 weeks or 4 weeks, we got on small landing craft, LSTs, and we waited in 3-4 feet of water off of Normandy on the beach. I was a platoon sergeant. I had 33 men under me, 11 men in each squad. We fought our way through France, advancing from 1 mile to 10 miles a day. On the light side, we took over a small town and we dug in for the night. And I told my squad leader to keep a sharp eye on the crossroads. Our job was to protect the troops from tanks, trucks coming down the crossroads. I told him if he had anything, saw anything moving, shoot and ask questions later. And I went back to my foxhole, and as soon as I went back to my foxhole, the gun went off. I jumped out of my hole. I got 3 men, went to the gun and asked, what are you shooting at? He said, there's a truck coming real slow with his lights off. We went to check it out, and what was it but a dead black cow laying in the road. He had saw something moving, and he shot a 57 millimeter anti-tank gun. Another time we were dug in for the night, and I had a phone line between my gunner and my foxhole. when all of a sudden the crank came on my phone and my biggest, bravest gunner tried to talk, but all he could say is, I can't. Nothing else come out. I got up, I took 4 men. We captured 4 Germans walking right past the gun, while the squad leader froze in fear. Another time we were in a pretty heated battle and I was pinned down with gunfire while going through a farmer's field. There was a small haystack, so I jumped under the hay, and to my surprise someone had gotten there before me. It was a big fat sow. She was giving birth to the little ones, and 10 were born while I was in that haystack. On the serious side, the next event wasn't so funny. I jumped on the running board of a truck to point to a gun position for my driver to pull into, when all of a sudden a mortar shell came over and hit the 5-gallon can of gas on the side of my truck. The can blew up, the gas flew all over me. I put my hands over my face, jumped into the ditch, rolled in the ditch, and my squad leader jumped on top of me with his jacket off and put the flames out. I laid in a field hospital for 18 days with my wrists pinned to the sheets at night. During the day, the sun would get so hot it'd beat down and the boric acid ointment would run down my face. Most of you have heard of Hogan's Heroes and some of the TV series that they had that they showed on television. Well, let me assure you, Stalag 9B was not like that. Private Ryan movie was fairly realistic, pretty good. After fighting 4 major battles in France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Germany, I was taken prisoner of war while fighting in the Battle of the Bulge and taken to Stalag 9B. Before we talk about the camp, let me share a few weeks of unusual happenings with you. Let me set the stage. Make believe that you're there with me. The weather was real cold. There was 14 to 16 inches of snow on the ground. We had dug in our holes for about a month with very little fighting going on. We were waiting for the Russians to catch up so that our division was covering 28 miles of the front. There were 4 armies lined up along a line pushing into Germany. The British were on the left and the north. I was in the 1st Army, we were 2nd. General Patton's army was next alongside of us, and then the 9th Army was alongside of him. We were given orders to move forward and take a little town of Prum, Germany, between 20 and 30 kilometers straight ahead. At the same time, the other armies were given the same order. Our outfit was walking through the Ardennes forests, and the other armies were running into trouble. They got bogged down. It was snowing real hard. The Air Force was grounded. Communications were cut off. We took the town, dug in for the night, sent out men to survey the area, but by the break of day, the Germans had bombarded us, and von Rundstedt had us completely surrounded. During this time, I can remember my squad leader laying alongside of me about 20 feet away, and he got hit, his leg got blown off. Another time we were under fire, and my company commander and I were running for the same foxhole. I let him take the foxhole, and I jumped into the ditch on the side of the hole. The next mortar shell landed in the foxhole. We fought for 18 days trying to get back to our lines. We ran out of ammunition. The airport was still grounded. We fixed bayonets, and we fought for another couple of days before destroying our guns. There was 8,663 U.S. soldiers killed in the Battle of the Bulge and 7,001 captured. Of the 33 men I had in my platoon, 7 of us came back. We were taken prisoners by the SS troops, black boots and all. And the policy at that time was never to take a prisoner. So we were pretty sure what was going to happen to us. We were lined up on the side of the road. A machine gunner set up his gun and loaded it with ammunition. The commander and officer hollering at him to hurry up. One of our men was singing "Nearer, My God, to Thee," and I tell you, we were all praying. All of a sudden, another German officer came running up and told the gunner to take down his gun. This officer had been wounded, and he had 10 other guys with him who were wounded, and he was going to take them back for treatment. And he told them that they would take us to a concentration camp. We were taken in small groups of about 30 each, and the German officer told me in perfect English where we were going to go. He said we're going to walk 25 kilometers to meet a train, and he asked me where I lived, and I told him, well, I can't tell you. All I can tell you is I live in Chicago, and my name is Ed. He told me his name was Hans, and that he used to live in the United States. After walking and talking a while, he asked me, where did you live in Chicago? I said, Belmont and Central. He says, is Andy's Candy still on the corner? Musket and Hendricks on the other corner, and Walgreens on the other corner. I says, yeah, how did you know him? Well, I used to live at Irving Park in Ashland, and I went to Lakeview High School. He said his parents had gone back to Germany in the late 30s, and they wouldn't let him come back. They put him in the service also, even though he was born in the United States. His parents had both been killed. He had been shot in the leg and was going back for treatment. We walked about 12 miles the first day, passing through small towns where people threw rocks at us. We stopped for the night at an old bombed-out church and slept on the floor. The next day we walked another 4 miles and got on a train. We were locked in small baggage cars, 60 men to a car, along with about 600 other men. The train pulled out of the station into the yard where it was supposed to wait until it got dark. However, while we were waiting there, the American Air Force flew over, and they had other ideas. The plane flew over and dropped some red flares 500 feet from the train. This meant bombers, here's your target for the night, hit it. The first wave come over, and luckily the bombs fell short of the target. Before the next wave come over, we tried to knock out the side of the boxcar. All 60 of us ran from one side of the car to the other, but we couldn't knock the wall out, couldn't budge it. We all knew that there was going to be another group of bombers coming, so we got down on our knees. One of the men pulled out his Bible and read the 14th chapter of John. Let not your heart be troubled. He also sang a song, with someone like you, a pal so good and true. And whenever I hear that song sung, I find myself locked in that boxcar with all of them prisoners. The next wave of bombers come over and hit much closer as the shrapnel hit the side of the boxcars. The guy next to me hollered that he had been hit, but when I pulled up his jacket and shirt, all he had was a splinter of wood in his back. When things calmed down, someone looked out the 12 by 6-inch little screen that was at the end of the boxcar, and could see how many cars were damaged up in front of us. The guards were pulling out the dead men. After switching the cars from the train and removing the damaged cars, we were on our way. We arrived at Stalag 9A in Frankfurt, Germany, where we were interviewed and separated into different groups. They clipped off our dog tags. The Jewish men were taken away. The privates and PFCs were taken away. The non-commissioned officers, which I was shipped further into Germany, and the officers were sent to Siberia. After about a week, we were all sent to different places, and I wound up in Stalag 9B, about 20 miles southwest of Berlin, in a little town called Kassel, K-A-S-S-E-L. We arrived at our camp and were greeted by the company commander, who made us strip down to just our pants, no shoes, no shirt, no jackets. We stood in the snow for about an hour before we were allowed to go into the barracks. Some of the men froze their toes and they turned black. I just kept jumping up and down and moving, and I was lucky. My toes only turn white when it gets cold. We were assigned where to live. When we arrived at the barrack, who should be there at this barrack but Hans, the fellow who had told them that he would take us to a concentration camp. What did the camp look like? It was about 3 square blocks. It had 3 barbed wire fences around it. At each corner was a watchtower with a guard with floodlights and a machine gun pointed down on us. They were pretty good shots too, as no one made it past the 3rd fence. Quite a few tried it. The barracks were similar to our GI buildings, but the inside was packed solid with men. The bunks were 4 high, made of wood, no mattresses, straw. I had the 3rd bunk from the top. One of my sergeants had the top bunk. We took the straw out of both bunks, put them together, and we slept together. We didn't have to worry about that at that time. There was 1 pot-bellied stove in the barrack, and the fire went out every night. There was 100 men to a barrack, and 1 central washroom, and it was about a block away. And you didn't have to use that very much. There was a central mess hall, which was at the opposite end of the camp, where the food was passed out through a little open window. You took your canteen cup and held it up to the window. They put a half a cup of soup and they gave you a piece of bread, and you went back to your barracks and ate it, and you got that once a day. What was the menu? We had rutabaga soup, potato soup, bean soup, grass soup, dandelion soup, and if you were lucky, you got a piece of horse meat. We ate between 12 and 2 o'clock, and you'd be better to be there, otherwise you didn't get any food. If you were sick, you couldn't walk, you didn't eat. You stood out in the rain and the snow like a beggar with a little cup. When I was captured, I weighed 185 pounds. When I was liberated, I weighed 134 pounds. It was a good diet, but I wouldn't recommend it. The only way you could get extra chow was to put in railroad tracks in the evening. And every chance I got, I volunteered to put in railroad tracks. Not to help the Germans, but to get out of that camp and get a little exercise and to keep my mind more active so I wasn't feeling sorry for myself. When we first got into camp, we would have morning exercises and throw around a homemade baseball. But as we grew weaker, they wouldn't come out anymore. We brushed our teeth with our finger with salt, sprayed salt on our fingers. And I think I had one shower each month for the 6 months I was in the camp. We went in 20 at a time, and it looked like a butcher freezer with a regular glass doors on it, 20 at a time, and we didn't know whether they were going to turn on the gas jets or the water. We had heard about all of the killing and the gassing and the burning of prisoners and weren't anxious to get a shower. How did we spend our time during the day? We went up, we had set up classes at each end of the barrack. One end of the barrack, we had Bible study. The Swiss gave us 6 Bibles, and every morning we would study the Bible. You didn't have to join the class, but it was up to you if you wanted to. We took turns leading the groups, and if you didn't want to join, that was up to you. On Sunday morning, we had regular church services. Out of the 15 barracks that we had, there was a Protestant service and a Catholic service going on in one of the barracks. We had the entire service. We had volunteers who sang in the choir. We had volunteers who preached. And everything was done just by the PWs. At the other end of the building during the week, we had cooking classes. There were chefs, mess sergeants, cooks, candy makers, bakers. We had them all there. We made recipe books, and we all wrote down our recipes, worrying about what we were going to eat if we ever got out of there. The classes were held during the day only, as we had no electricity. Night we sat around and told stories. Every night we would hear over the loudspeaker that the Americans are getting defeated by the Germans and they would be soon ruling the world. However, every night Hans would sneak off in a corner and speak to one of us and tell us that the Germans were advancing, and it would only be a short time before they would be getting to the camp. There were times when Hans had to be very strict. He carried a short whip with him, and he gave you a swat on the backside if you did anything wrong. They switched guards frequently, so we didn't know when we were going to have him and when we weren't going to have him. In the morning, we were supposed to line up 10 across and 10 deep. That's the only way they could count. So we'd line up 9 across and 11 deep and throw them all off. Discipline was strict, however, if you really did suffer something wrong, you went to solitary confinement and had water for 7 days, nothing else. We had a doctor from Switzerland who came every other week. You better be sick, because he had no infirmary. He had very little medicine, and most of his patients were having problems mentally and diarrhea. He had other problems in the camp. Our own fighters would shoot up the camp every once in a while, and they would get a few of us. We tried to escape by digging underneath the barracks, and no luck. The sewer hole that we got dug into caved in, and we failed. I met Hans in the washroom one night, and he told me that the Americans are getting close, and we were going to move us to further inland. We passed the word around and decided we were all going to act real sick for roll call that next morning. So we all filled our mouths up with water, went outside for roll call, and we were splitting water all over the place, and they didn't know what to do. So they decided that the Americans are too close, they're going to leave. So they left. All of the guards left, locked the gates, and left. A few minutes later, Hans come running back, and he was dressed just like we were, with shirts, t-shirts, pants, no shoes, and he come running back. A couple of hours later, we heard General Patton come. All of a sudden, we heard the tanks roaring. They came and knocked over the fences and released us. We were all airlifted to Camp Lucky Strike in France, where we were deloused, given haircuts, beard cuts, received new clothing, and the next day they were making up a list already of who's going to be able to get out. You had to have so many points in order to get out of service. The points were given to you for being every month you were in service, for being overseas, points for each battle you were in, points for being a prisoner of war, points for every medal that you got. We boarded planes and we flew to Boston, dropping off some men and continuing to Billy Mitchell Field in Milwaukee, where we were picked up by the Fort Sheridan MPs. We were processed through and given a 30-day recuperation furlough at home with strict diet to fatten up. You had to be within 10 pounds of your normal weight before they would discharge you. Then we were given a 60-day leave for Miami Beach, Florida, for physical examinations and for buildup. We were processed so fast that when I called home from Fort Sheridan, I had been in Fort Sheridan by now, that I would be coming home that evening. They couldn't believe me because they received the telegram that morning saying that I was just liberated. When I walked in the front door, my family was there and a whole family looking there at the door. They just stared at me. They didn't want to touch me. I looked so thin and peaked that they were afraid that I was going to break. I'll never forget though, and I was so embarrassed. We were going to have coffee, which was our normal thing to do, standing around the dining room table. An airplane flew over. I dove underneath that table so fast it wasn't funny. And they just all looked at me. We just had a big laugh. In closing, I'd like to say, each one of us is going to have trying experiences in our life. Some might not be as drastic as others. But just remember, the Lord is on your side. Don't be afraid to talk to him. He's right there to help you when you need him. Thank you. It's been a pleasure to witness my faith and trust in the Lord for all that he has done for me. And the last thing that usually the kids ask me is, how come you don't wear medals? Or how come you don't have any medals on? Well, I got the medals. They're in my drawer in a little box, and that's where they're going to stay. And then here's what my discharge says. You have the Victory Medal, the American Theater Ribbon, the European African Ribbon, the Middle Eastern Theater Ribbon, 3 bronze battle stars, 1 overseas service bar, 1 good conduct medal, 2 Purple Hearts, sharpshooter, M1 rifle, expert infantryman badge, and combat infantryman badge. Thank you. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Ed. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Does anyone have any questions for Ed?
Do you still have the rest?
Sure.
I have a question. Right now, there's a soldier out there who's wondering if anybody's remembering them. What would you say to that soldier today? if you could, talk to him right now.
What would I say to that soldier if I
Right
could
now,
talk to
someone in
him?
the world.
Just hang in there. Things are going to get better. I had a rough time, and I had a rough time because I lost so many men. I mean, I had 33 men, and only 7 of us came back. And I would be right back out there again if I could, but I just can't.
What would you say to his family?
Well, I spoke to a lot of families when I came back. The first thing they did when I came back, because I was a prisoner of war, I went and talked to the prisoner of war mothers, and I more than once, like about 10 times, and tried to assure them that they were going to be all right. Things weren't as bad as what they think they are. A rough thing to do, but something that had to be done. And I was privileged to do it. Anybody? Can't be.
No.
There's got to be more questions than that.
Well, yeah.
I think
And-
you've awed people.
And 56 years, how did you and Rose meet?
How did we meet?
Yeah, how did you guys meet?
Well, it's a funny story, but we met through church.
The church? Okay.
She came over, at that time they called them parish workers. She came over to work in the church. And I was there, and it just so happened.
Rest is history, right?
Ed, you were next to Patton. Who was your commanding general?
Bradley,
Omar Bradley.
Omar Bradley.
His friend.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you still talk to the 7, or at least the ones that are surviving? Do you keep
I
contact?
have lost contact with all of them.
With all of them?
With all of them. Lost contact with all of them. I did for quite a few years, but I have lost contact with all of them.
You said you took the classes and you wrote recipes.
Yes, I still have the books
Do you?
too.
What's your
I've
favorite?
got all of the books, the recipe books. I've got all of the mail that went back and forth in a book. Yeah, I've got them all. We had them out a couple of weeks ago. They're falling apart. Anybody else have a question?
Could you tell us a little bit about your honor flight that you recently won?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, talk about, this is just recent, right?
yeah. Just on November
November.
2nd, I was privileged to go on the honor flight with the group to Washington D.C. and we had a real good time. I put myself down a couple of notes, I think. We had a real good time. We had a report to Midway Airport, 4:30 roll call. You had roll call at 4:30, 4:35. You went and got a jersey. 4:40, you went and got a backpack. 5 o'clock, you were signed in, ready to get on the plane. When you got on the plane, there was a sandwich, scrambled eggs and bacon and cheese and a bottle of water. That was my breakfast. That was our breakfast. We flew to Washington, D.C. About between 500 and 800 people met us at the airport, greeted us. They had coffee and donuts, and the 3 Andrew sisters were singing. and it was really, really nice. And then we went to the Smithsonian Institute, and we saw all the planes and the rockets and everything else. After we got done there, we went to McDonald's, which was in the building, and we had another McDonald hamburger. In the afternoon, the first thing, we went to the World War II Memorial, and that is outstanding. That is the most beautiful thing you want to see. It's a big round circle, and they got pillars up all the way around for all of the states, and then the waterfall in the middle. of it. You look one way, you could see the Washington Monument. You look the other way, you can see the other big buildings on the opposite side, away from each other. After we went to the World War II Memorial, we went to the Korean Memorial, and we saw that. And the Korean Memorial is the one with the soldiers. They have soldiers walking through the fields and dressed up in their uniforms. And then we went to the Vietnam Memorial, which is the big wall with all the names on it. And we spent time there. We drove through the Arlington Cemetery. Then we went to the changing of the guards at the Arlington Cemetery, and we placed a wreath there. We got on the plane again to come back, and there was another 500-600 people at the airport to greet us. We got back to Chicago in Midway Airport. There was 1,900 people at the airport to meet us when we got back. It was really a wonderful feeling. It was an awful long day, and it was a little bit rough, but it was well worth it. And anybody who gets the honor and the privilege to go, make sure you go. If your fathers or your uncles or whoever, make sure they go, because they will really enjoy it. It was well worth it. Okay?
Yeah, Ed, does this patch look familiar, or? Oh, is that?
Yep.
That's your patch, right?
That's my patch.
Golden Lions, is that what they're called?
Yep.
Golden Lions. Well, now it's a reserve unit in Puerto Rico. Looks like they were. So they're still carrying on your.
Still carrying them on, yeah.
Your, tradition there, Ed.
Yeah.
What became of Klaus?
What was that?
Hans.
Sorry.
Hans Klaus.
What became of the guard?
Hans?
Yeah, Hans.
Well, I lost contact. When Hans come back to the States, I met him. We went out for dinner together with him and his new wife. He had married after he'd gotten out of service. And it took him about a year to get back to the States before he could get back to the States. But then they lived in Chicago shortly, and then they moved to Colorado. I sent letters to him back and forth for about 5-6 years. Then all of a sudden I started getting the letters back, and I lost contact with him.
So when the camp was liberated, was he then taken as a German prisoner?
No, he was taken as an American prisoner. He
was an American citizen, having been.
We vouched for him, or told them when they when they came and got us who he was and what he did and so forth. And then we lost contact with him for nearly a year before we finally saw him again.
All right, Ed, I appreciate you coming out, and I want to say thank you for your service.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I want to thank Rose and
Norm.
their distinguished guests for coming. Norm and Vivian, please. And also Kathy Johnson for helping us arrange Ed's coming out and talking to us tonight. So we really appreciate you coming out and just at all of the things that you've gone through. And I could just taste a little bit of it and being in combat myself, but nothing of what you've been through as far as that goes. So thank you very much for your service and what you've done. There's probably still a lot more stories that we can tap out of you at the same time. So